Thank you, Nora, for your kind words, and thanks to all of you for being here today, and a special thanks to the Institute for Leadership and Service for giving us this platform to learn and share and engage with one another. So today, the title of my talk will be Empathy Institutionalized, Sociocultural Dialogue as a Strategic Peacebuilding Initiative. Residents of Wellsville, New York, awake one day to find a swastika spray painted on the side of a community softball dugout, accompanied by the words, "Make America White Again." A Connecticut resident is physically assaulted while brandishing an American flag and political sign in support of Donald Trump. Upon returning home one evening, a Puerto Rican family in Massachusetts discovers the word Trump and "go home" etched into the side of their car. During the 10 days following the 2016 presidential election, the Southern Poverty Law Center counted 867 hate incidents reported within this time frame, a number absolutely appalling in and of itself, but likely nowhere near reflective of the full magnitude of instances which took place and have continued to plague members of our society in the election's aftermath. It has become increasingly evident that the United States remains a far more polarized society than we were previously aware, with violence and hate slurs superseding dialogue across difference in at least 867 cases. Strikingly, of these cases, the most common settings for such events to occur were K-12 institutions and college campuses, demonstrating a clear need for interventions across a variety of institutional levels, but particularly so for our forthcoming generations. While the motivation behind such attacks remains rooted within a complex interaction of historic, systemic, and individual prejudices, their occurrence illuminates a variety of lacking capacities in our society at large. At the core of many are deficient abilities to communicate and empathize with those who appear to be different than ourselves. And so, in the face of prominent polarization, we are left with the ever-present question of today: how can we possibly begin to work to bridge such deep divides? Research suggests that in searching for sustainable solutions to conflict, we look just there, the beginning. This work explores from an integrative psychosocial perspective the potential that exists in working to define a more equitable, empathetic means to a conflict's end by shaping a new beginning, through going directly to the institutions that comprise our own beginnings, schools. Through a combined research lens of peace studies as well as social and developmental psychology, this presentation will examine the capacities of sociocultural dialogue as a strategic peacebuilding initiative, specifically imagined in the context of our education system. Simply put, peacebuilding here refers to our efforts to transcend social division in ways that promote productive interpersonal relationships across identities. In labeling this peacebuilding as strategic, we signify that peacebuilding efforts must be consistently applied across all levels of society, both in policy and in practice. These efforts ultimately serve not only as a form of conflict resolution in our present society, but as a progressive development for sustainable means to address future division. Today, I would like to examine the capacity of empathy and its connections to sociocultural dialogue and serving as an integral part of these peacebuilding initiatives through exploration of the following points. The first assesses empathy as a cognitively based emotional response that you or I may feel based on our own perceptions of others' needs. In doing this, we enter into discussion as to not only how, but why empathy should be defined, measured, and increased in quantifiable outcomes-based terms that allow us to utilize research-driven models in the promotion of strategic peacebuilding. In moving forward with these initiatives, it follows that creating institutionalized spaces for empathetically oriented dialogue and perspective-taking experiences are critical to instilling these forms of understanding within future generations. I argue that promoting sociocultural dialogue in educational spaces offers one of the most viable pathways to creating this future and providing opportunities for our youth to interact thoughtfully and collaboratively in intentional ways. Finally, we will explore how both the short and long-term projected impacts of such opportunities hold profound influence over the ways in which our society can be equipped with the necessary skills to address instances of deep division, such as that which we experience today. So initially, we must address the question, why empathy? What role does empathy play in bridging our divides? The term itself is one that we often use colloquially, accompanied by a general understanding that its presence is good, yet lacking a concrete understanding of why this is so. While the benefits of increased levels of empathy have been shown to correlate with a number of individual and interpersonal factors, for the purposes of this presentation, we will focus on the measures that collectively receive some of the most evidential support. These are best encompassed by Charles Daniel Batson's explanation of the empathy-altruism hypothesis, which simply put, indicates that our empathetic response provokes altruistic motivation. In fact, our brain's neural pathways used for empathy coincide directly with those controlling this motivation. Empathy, therefore, neurologically amplifies our motivation to meet the needs we see others facing in the world. It follows that an empathetic response is demonstrated to lead to more help in situations of need, greater situational competency in navigating these circumstances, and decreased levels of individual aggression. Furthermore, empathy is shown to help break down negative internal perceptions of difference through emotionally highlighting similarities between ourselves and others. These findings implicate empathy as a vital component in peace-building processes, well worth monitoring on a deeper level. Researchers and scholars have vehemently debated the measures by which to do this, resulting in a variety of existing empathy scales today. One of the most widely accepted remains Davis's Interpersonal Reactivity Index, as it utilizes a multidimensional approach incorporating a wide variety of emerging research. In measuring such intangible qualities in statistically quantifiable ways, a valid argument can be made that in the process, we simultaneously lose a fundamental piece of empathy's essence. While this counterpoint is an important one to remain cognizant of, the benefits of making an earnest attempt to engage in outcomes-based analysis of these qualities may ultimately be what allows for their reach to expand. In quantifying the value of concepts such as empathetic response and its relation to sociocultural dialogue, we become able to build rapport for such practices within our current social framework. A framework that not only emphasizes statistical outcomes as a necessary component in defining success, but attaches financial funding to such successes. Thus, the more we measure the importance of conversation in quantifiable terms, the more institutional validity we secure to support it as a sustainable peace-building initiative, making these practices accessible to mainstream institutions and ultimately benefiting a greater amount of individuals. Following the discernment of the why behind the importance of building and assessing empathy, the next question remains, how? In discussing how to actually implement these strategies, sociocultural dialogue emerges as a key practice capable of increasing empathetic levels through relevant conversation. Developmentally speaking, these conversations are beneficial at any level, but can be especially so at critical benchmarks throughout childhood. One such benchmark occurs around the age of 9, or at a 3rd grade level. Here, youth begin to develop both a greater ability to expand their own point of view to include that of others, as well as a heightened sense of social and moral understanding. So what would it look like to introduce empathy-building dialogue within the context of a 3rd grade classroom? Perhaps our answer lies in approaches remarkably similar to a variety of resources already in use, but combined in innovative and context-specific ways. This could include adapting anything from social studies curriculum to mentoring programs, even to frameworks of conversation, such as the civic reflection model employed here by the Institute of Leadership and Service. Particularly in pursuing in what is defined as a perspective-taking framework through these approaches, students are challenged to actively listen and theoretically place themselves in the situation of another. Perspective-taking exercises are typically initiated by phrases such as, picture yourself in this person's place, or imagine if this happened to you. Framing dialogue in such a way correlates with high instances of an increase in empathetic response, meaning that perspective-taking does in fact improve our ability to empathize with others over time. Going even further, research indicates that using such modes of conversation actually heightens cognitive overlap between our own perceptions of self and other, showing that, in a sense, we quite literally project ourselves onto the identity of another person in the moment that we empathize. The overlap between self and other promoted by this type of discussion allows us to acknowledge and respect differences while simultaneously looking beyond them through an empathetic lens to identify similarities in thought, feeling, and action. Yet, we cannot simply instruct a bunch of 9-year-olds sitting in a classroom to spend an hour picturing themselves in another situation and expect abundant levels of newfound empathy to just manifest. Careful consideration in approach remains crucial to maximizing both student enjoyment and ultimate benefit from these activities. As previously mentioned, this can take many forms or combine a number of pre-existing sources, varying by context and continual input from the educators in a specific environment. Perspectives for a Diverse Americas program, or the Southern Poverty Law Center's Teaching Tolerance database, for example, provide a wealth of resources on approaching conversation regarding topics such as race, gender, class, and ability in developmentally appropriate ways within classroom settings. Catherine and Toshi's children's books cover similar subjects using concepts such as numbers or colors in the abstract as being symbolic of larger social issues, allowing students to draw connections on their own accord between her work and the world around them. Even clips from Disney movies such as Zootopia can be used to structure developmentally appropriate discussions for students to engage in critical dialogue for one another, giving rise for opportunities to practice active listening and perspective-taking frameworks through respectfully hearing others' thoughts and experiences. It remains imperative that these dialogues provide students with the space to think, speak, and listen for themselves, engaging directly with one another in the presence of a conversation facilitator, but never crossing over into a lecture-style setting. This permits students to learn how to communicate, interpret, and process difference in a positive way, and at a critical age when they begin to reach the cognitive capacity to do so. An increase in communication across differences, and therefore facilitating an increase in perspective-taking experiences, we begin to strive toward a more systemic increase in empathetic processing with the potential to reshape social and systemic interactions for generations to come. In working to develop peace-building processes that aim to overcome divisions, like we see today, we must expand vital practices traditionally viewed as being solely interpersonal to an institutional magnitude. We must delve further into why and how intangible necessities such as empathy can be measured and increased, ultimately looking directly at systems such as education, which hold such strong potential for the incorporation of strategic peacebuilding initiatives. In providing spaces for individuals to engage with one another through perspective-taking experiences and relating these experiences to the numerous benefits of empathetic response, we move from a present-day narrative surrounded by issues of hatred to a future one shaped by an overwhelming sense of hope. Thank you.